At this time, I'd like to call the August the 12th, 2021 meeting of the Plaquemines Parish Council Audit Committee to order, and the machine is open for roll call. Let the record reflect that all members are present and that Mr. Duke is here representing the Audit Department. And at this time, we'll ask Mr. Duke to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Duke. And at this time, we'll move to item 2A.
2A, review of the Borrow Pits Internal Audit Report.
Okay, Mr. Duke, you're up. Mr. Duke, we'll have to speak into the microphone. Mr. Duke.
Parish Borrow Pits, project number 2021-11. On page 6 of the report, under the executive summary, the objectives of the audit are Plaquemines Parish Council ordinances numbers 12-238, section 92 through 93, and ordinances 14-177, 15-14, and 15-66. Standards, mandates, and directives are being implemented and monitored for compliance by Plaquemines Parish management.
Mr. Duke, do you have anything to put on the screen?
Yes, it should be up there. Oh,
It was just your laptop, like your
All right.
wallpaper.
hang on a second. Okay, so this is where we are now. Completed the objectives. We're going to scroll down to the internal audit conclusions. Plaquemines Parish Council directives, standards, and mandates should be implemented and monitored by the parish management. If management does not believe there's a cost benefit to the parish worth implementing the directive or due to another valid reason, parish management should provide their argument in writing to the parish council. The issue would then be discussed at the earliest parish council meeting and then voted on. And of course, I do believe, according to our charter, that the parish president can also veto the ordinance or resolution. Secondly, there is a high risk that a negative event can happen to Plaquemines Parish government when Plaquemines Parish Council ordinances and resolutions are not implemented and monitored. Parish management should purchase professional services to monitor the borrow pits as mandated in Ordinance 14-177. Borrow pit fees should be calculated for accuracy each year. Ordinance 12-238 should be rewritten or could be rewritten in a more concise and clear manner. Internal audit finding, Plaquemines Parish Council borrow pit ordinances. Criteria, Plaquemines Parish management has implemented and is monitoring the borrow pits in accordance with these ordinances. Condition, the auditor was unable to obtain sufficient supporting documentation to prove that parish management is monitoring these ordinances. Kind of turn to page, let's go down to page number 8 and we'll look at the cause. Number 8, the cause. According to Plaquemines Parish Permits Department, the reason that these ordinances were not addressed by management is because management did not have the funding to purchase these services. However, during my research, it is noted that Plaquemines Parish management could have or should have followed Parish Ordinance 14-177 and used the borrow pit fees to purchase the professional services to monitor the borrow pits. On page 9, we look at the exposure and my recommendations and the management responses. Exposure, a lack of monitoring of the borrow pits can result in a high risk of a negative event happening to the parish. recommendations. Borrow pit fees should be earmarked and used to purchase professional services to monitor the borrow pits. In my opinion, and I've stated previously, all parish ordinances and resolutions should always be implemented unless management has a valid argument against it or it's vetoed by the parish president. Management response, the legal department basically states their services or their staff should not be involved in the monitoring of the borrow pits because it's bad policy and it's not in compliance with the Louisiana State Bar Association rules of professional conduct. Furthermore, though, the legal department does agree with and accepts the recommendation that the borrow pit fees be earmarked by council for regulatory enforcement of the borrow pits. Director of Public Service states, management intends to use borrow pit fees to dedicate to acquiring professional services to provide oversight for the operation of the parish borrow pits, as it is the wish of the consensus of the council. Management intends to comply with all ordinances related to borrow pits. Okay, that concludes the report, internal audit report on the borrow pits.
Do you have any comments or questions from members?
Yeah. I have a question. Is there anywhere stated in Ordinance 12-238 that when those fees come into the parish, they're supposed to be set aside for strictly professional fees, or is there a certain amount?
No, I believe it states in 14-177 all fees should be earmarked.
And that is not the case?
And that is not the case. No, ma'am.
Where they going?
In the general?
The general fund.
And still the parish administration doesn't want to do any work
That's correct.
using the fees.
Yes, and my research showed that I think from 2013 to February 9th of 2020, they collected a little over $511,000, which would have been sufficient to monitor these borrow pits, I think.
So my question to the board right now, should we do a resolution to make sure the administration takes that money and do a separate fund for the borough pit? I mean, I'm just asking.
We should if they're not going to do
Because they're
the
not
work,
following the
inspecting
ordinance.
it or nothing, so.
Exactly.
Yes. We've had this discussion with the administration, and, they just have not moved forward with what we have requested. What we have requested is a complete accounting of the funds that were received and that were dedicated under Ordinance 14-177 for this purpose, which they basically have not complied with.
My table in the report does show that.
Mr. Duke has provided us a number, but we've asked the Finance Department to give us their number. And, naturally, that number should match your number because you audited the funds.
Right, the numbers that I got, I did that in conjunction with the Finance Department and the Permits Department, so they should agree.
However, we have been asking the administration to provide us with this information. We've also asked the administration to comply with the ordinance that mandates the parish president appoint a legal staff member to handle this issue, and they have all bowed out. So that's why we are in the position we are today, where we have the council attorney, as special council attorney, handling this issue because the administration refuses to handle it. So, having said all of that, and I know Mr. Duke recommends that we hire professional services, but the previous administrations and councils have canceled those professional service contracts for various reasons. And I would recommend that what we do is during the budgeting hearing, establish, and prior to the budget hearing, create a position in the permitting department or some department that can be funded by these funds to be able to accept these responsibilities that the administration refuses to accept through the legal department. Now, the administration of the legal department pushes the responsibility over to the permit department and says that they should be handling it.
That is correct.
Which, for various reasons, and we can all speculate on what those reasons are, but to make this work, we have to implement, I would think, an in-house position that can be utilized for this purpose. And, you know, since the administration has not complied with the ordinances, which, you know, is technically a violation of the charter, because the charter states that the parish administration is to enforce and carry out the policies adopted by the council. So we're at a crossroads here, and I don't see anybody from the administration here today to answer these questions, but we've been in discussion with them in previous meetings and had these discussions. So as it stands now, my recommendation would be that we have a position created and drafted for introduction, and during the budget hearings, we take the position that we fund that position from the accounting funds that are derived from the purposes of the ordinances that are set in place, and more particularly 12238.
I think we ought to make an account in finance just for this money.
We can ask the finance department to do that as well.
I think it'd be best if we get a resolution. That way we have something on record.
So that's fine. Would you like the council secretary to draft you one? Okay.
I have another question while we're looking at this. On page 15, Parish Ordinance 15-66, I'm asking the board, do you recommend that we rescind this ordinance, or because evidently the administration refuses to use their, even though previous administration wanted to use their in-house legal, but now administration today does not want to use in-house legal.
We're already made Danny.
Right. So we hired Danny to look into it.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I would recommend is that, you know, the ordinance that was passed in May of 2015, to make to require the parish president to assign a member of the legal department, I think that, you know, it's not a bad ordinance, and I think that the legal department has a responsibility to do what they have to do. And we won't have this president forever. So, you know, if we got to change the rules because the president refuses to do his job, I mean, it doesn't do us any good, you know, to be consistent.
It
And so,
doesn't matter if one person has a conflict, how many other attorneys we have in that office?
yes, I mean, we've heard that argument as well, that one of the attorneys has a conflict and that there are 5 attorneys in that office. So, I mean, if you want to rescind it, that's one thing, but what we're doing is we're setting up a precedent to make the council attorney from now on be responsible for this issue that is really a day-to-day operation of the legal department. And the only reason we wound up with the council attorney in that role currently is because of the refusal. So, I mean, I look at government as, you know, building blocks, and, you know, we're back on ordinances that go back to 12238, and, you know, the ordinances that we're talking about 1566 and so forth. If we think it's bad policy that the legal department represents the government on this issue, you know.
Well, then maybe, then we have a Borough Pit Board that needs to maybe look at Ordinance 12-238 and maybe make some amendments to it correctly. I mean,
Well,
unless y'all think it's,
my comments on to the Borough Pit Committee, it served its purpose. I'm hoping that we're getting ready to start on all the same page moving forward. The problems that we're having are in-house problems. You know, it's administration and legal department in a different role than what the ordinances say. I mean, that's my opinion of how I see the issues are. No matter what other legal issues are out there, if we think that, and the auditor thinks that 238 should be written, then I think the legal department should look at the ordinance and make some recommendations. If not, then we go to outside counsel, as they did before when they had the firm of Dwyer, Camry, and Suffering get together with the lawyers of the other borough pit owners and came up with 238. So, you know, I thought 238, you know, served its purpose and continues to serve its purpose. But if there are changes that need to be made, then we need to discuss them. And I'm not sure if you have any specific changes that you would like to discuss at this time or look at it in the future. But the audit is telling, and it's got obviously some issues that need to be resolved.
Ms. Newberry, I'd like to comment on this.
Mr. Valley, just hold on a minute. When we finish, you can be recognized.
Well, Mr. Russell, as a member of the Borough Pit Committee that I served on with you and you,
No, but Mr. Valley,
Carlton.
protocol here, we finished the discussion here, and you know the protocol. So if you'd like to speak, we will recognize you just in a minute when we finish with the discussion at the table.
we can do that, Mr. Russell, but you seem to take everything out of context of where it is and what's going on.
No,
Borough Pit Committee has not even acted upon this or seen this report, and yet you're moving on to make a lot of changes and stuff
You're
that
not doing it, Mr.
precedes
Valley.
itself.
You're out of order, Mr. Valley.
Okay, I'll sit down.
Thank you. I do have the chair today. So, Ms. Newberry, to continue this or finalize this discussion before we recognize those members of the audience that want to speak, what is your wishes to do with 238?
I was just asking for your opinion. Maybe it's something that
Yeah.
we could address. And if the board or any of if anybody seems to be okay with 238, I'm good with that. So I was just asking for your opinion.
Mr. Konovich, you have any?
Oh, if she wants, we can talk about it at another time and get the board's opinion on it too. But we can't do anything right now.
Yeah. Maybe we
Right.
can bring administration on it too. I don't know.
Well, it does say in the audit that it could be written to be clearer. That's one of Mr. Duke's findings. So, it's appropriate to address that. Any further discussion or comments from the table at this time on Mr. Duke?
I have another question since we're up here. Mr. Duke, you have tables in the audit. So you have on the table, you have violation fees. Did you find out what the violations were?
Permit department did not have the documentation to support that.
Mr. Duke, talking to the mic, please.
The permit department did not supply the document. I asked them, they didn't supply that documentation.
Thank you.
So you strictly got the numbers from them and not the violation?
That's correct. And I did ask them for it, and they said they couldn't go back and retrieve that for some reason.
Okay, and also on page 11, under scope, the last paragraph under scope, you stated the auditor considered the possibility of fraud, waste, and abuse within the Borough Pit operations. Can you elaborate on that?
Which one is that?
Page 11,
8, 11,
under scope,
under scope. Okay.
last paragraph, the auditor considered the possibility, in addition to scope internal audit, including
Which one
consideration.
was that, Ms. Newberry? I don't see it.
It's the order to consider the possibility of fraud, waste, and abuse within the Borough Pit operations, which is the normal standard language that you include in all of your audits,
Yeah.
to be able to say, that's what you're looking at.
Right.
On page 11.
You're not saying there's a possibility of fraud, you're just saying there could.
No, I'm saying
It was
that-
part of the scope.
Yeah, it's just part of the scope, and I do, in every one of my audits, I consider what can go wrong here.
I understand,
Or-
but you don't always have that statement in your,
Yes, I do always have it in there, because I do that, I have to get my thinking in line with the possibility that fraud could exist.
okay.
So during the planning stage of all my audits, I think about it. I think, what can go wrong? How could fraud exist? So I look into it, and that's the way I come across it, if I do come across it. And if I do come across it, well, the audit will be canceled at that point, and we'll do something about it.
Thank you, I yield.
But yeah, there's standard language in all of the audits as far as the scope
Always
goes. But
standard language.
the findings, there's no findings in here of that.
Okay, just wanted to
No,
make that
there's
clear.
no fraud
Thank you.
findings.
There's no findings in here of that. Anything else, Ms. Newberry?
I yield.
No, sir.
Panovich? Anybody from the public would like to speak?
Donald Valley, and I'm going to come to this committee as a member of the Plaquemine Parish Borough Pit Committee, to which Mr. Carlton and you all sit on with me. It was my motion to utilize the auditing department for purposes to eliminate using an outside service as well as using outside attorneys, some of which Mr. Russell has been advocating for some time that we could save it. It was a result of a meeting that was held with the parish president in his office, I think Carlton, you were there, Mark, you were there, where they were very reluctant to spend any money or really get involved with attorneys in any efforts to do this. Based upon that, when the discussions with some of the members of the committee, we went forward and I made the motion to utilize Mr. Garrett, his counsel, to review this, and also Mr. Roussel's committee, which you all are. However, it never got to the point of sitting down and determining and asking the committee by members of the committee to dictate the scope and the limits of what was necessary. The whole purpose that I saw of the Borough Pit Committee, and Mr. Roussel, you recited numerous times, was to get to bringing back uniformity, see where we are with these things, and determine where we go. And if there was needs to make any changes to the 12-238 that's there, or 18-238 that's there. Now, we only had 2 meetings of that committee, none of which everybody lived in confusion as to who's on first and what was up. And there was no consensus at that point in time, other than asking to get involved. Let's find out what permits are still in existence, who's operating, where they're located, what terms and conditions. And then we got back and saw only the magnitude of all the variances and side agreements and deals that were made by various parties, approved and not approved by the council, and who's on first. It never got to the finalization of it. We got a lot of stacks and stacks of papers, I have them with me today, to review it. I think we got the cart before the horse. This report has never been disseminated to the Borough Pit Committee, which its sole purpose was to determine where we go, where we are with the status, and to advise to the full council what should be. And yet we turn around and now we're talking about all kind of conditions that you were putting on. There hadn't been any review of that committee in details. Now, you all brought 2 outside people into it, Mr. Wilcox and myself, because of our expertise that's in the business. And we've worked hard. We've looked at, I've read these things backwards and forward, Benny. I know you commented many times. It drives you crazy to have to read these documents. And I can imagine that you had problems when you did your audit to go through it and pull teeth from the parish. It is horrible. I can tell you what the procedures, the lack of knowledge of what the parish has done, or lack of what they should have done, what the council has done, and yet fully acknowledging all this stuff. We hear the same thing. I've said over and over. We need cheap dirt to fulfill what the parish needs for its levee systems and ongoing. With that, we took into consideration Mr. Hogan's, I think it's Plaquemine Parish, Borough Pit North, I think at that time. That got approved or recommended to be approved, and subsequently the council approved that on that, rightfully so. They waived some prior conditions in there. I discussed it with Mr. Hogan, a lot of people did, and we got on with it. I think at this point in time, now we're talking about declaratory judgment. I don't understand what's the end play. What are we trying to accomplish, on this thing? As far as I'm concerned, we talked about having commonality, one set of agreements, it's all there, but I'm not sure that all is applicable. The more I get into these things and I look at what deals were made back when and by other people, we have to, as a council, I think you all should be able to have to live with those documents. Whether you like it or you don't like it, you got to live with what's there. It's called a term, and I'm not an attorney, detrimental reliance. People that come to do business with Plaquemine Parish has to rely upon deals that are made and people they can trust. And I think that's been done. You all do it all the time, and yet I know the new group that's going to come in after you all probably not going to like what you all do, but they're going to have to live with it. And all I'm asking you, let's follow our normal procedure. You ask the committee to do something, this hadn't even been submitted to the committee, and we sit down and review and detail. Because frankly, in all the work you did, I can tell you did a tremendous amount of work, but you missed a lot of scope that I would ask you to do. Okay? And I think you pointed out that you also recognize that you missed a lot of scope.
In all due respect, I did.
Speaking to the mic, would you speak into the mic?
Sorry, can you talk in your microphone so I can hear you?
In all due respect, I did reach out by email to the chairman of the commission. I did not receive a reply. Okay?
It's just like, not unfair. Look, I respect all you guys. I know you all know
And,
personally.
I really thought that was, very strange, because I was willing to meet with you. Had I received a reply, I would have sat down with every one of you, and then the scope would have been pretty good. I would have included your scope in my audit.
You're
But,
good.
but that didn't happen.
I've watched all your work you've done for the parish.
Let's bring this back to order. Y'all want to have a debate, that's another time.
We're not debating, I'm complimenting.
We are dealing with an audit that was performed under the scope. written by the internal auditor. Whether you like it or not, that's what we're dealing with. Now, the results of the audit are public now, and if you want to take it to a borough pit committee and discuss it there, that's fine.
Well-
However, the scope is to evaluate the administration and its compliance with the with the ordinance that are on the books.
Mr.
And
Rousseau,
it's not,
I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute.
no, you're not going to interrupt me, or you're going to be removed from the chamber.
Go
You'll
ahead.
be recognized when I'm finished. So the point is that we had an audit committee meeting. The auditor did his job, and he has findings. The scope of the audit is to evaluate the administration's compliance with the audit. This is an internal audit of the government and how it operates. It's clearly stated in here that the government administration has not complied with the ordinances that are on the books that were adopted by the government, and that's where we're at. Now, if you want to extend the audit to some other arrangement, that's not what happened here. We dealt with what's on the books and the compliance internally. So I appreciate your comments, and you're running out of time, so go ahead and wrap up your comments.
Fine. Let me just tell you, I was the one that made the motion. I asked 2 days ago to possibly combine, to you and Carlton, combine this meeting with a Borough Pit Committee meeting so we could discuss it with all the people that are parties to this thing. Nowhere, and when we discussed there was a witch hunt going on in the parish is what they did or did not do. It was to look at uniformity, what the commitments were, what the deals were, everybody, each borough pit, and determine the compliance and where we were with them. Never to go on a witch hunt with the parish. We knew, I sat up there with you and I sat at Kirk's office and recognized they weren't doing certain things. I don't need an audit to tell me how bad they were doing it. We knew it. The audit should have been on the parish, each one of the pits and operations and the contracts at hand, where we are with it, and some recommendation from him to the Borough Pit Committee as to the facts. We didn't have all the pieces to play with, and still don't have them. So I'm going to cut it short, Mr. Roosevelt. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments?
George Pibach, 8311 Highway 23. Just one comment, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'd like to clarify something in the report, and I think it was brought up through an inquiry here, relating to violation fees. I represent Plaquemines, Dirt and Clay. The report shows violation fees of $19,000. That's actually a misnomer. Those were not violation fees. For informational purposes, the original permit issued to my client included a variance agreement, which was pit-specific as it relates to the particular pit that Plaquemines, Dirt and Clay had. The initial understanding was that my client would be paying a fee of $1,000 a year for the permit each year. My client did so. Then sometime in 2015, the administration, as the enforcer of the Borough Pit Ordinance, sent a demand letter to my client indicating that we were in violation of the variance agreement and in violation of the permit. After meeting with administration officials and their attorneys, that letter was repudiated, and the administration acknowledged in a subsequent agreement that there was not a violation, and there was an agreement that my client would be paying $10,000 a year thereafter as part of his permit fees. So I wanted to clarify that. I wasn't sure whether the audit had that particular document and was able to review that document, and I'll be more than happy to provide it. But by naming that as a violation fee, that is incorrect. The administration totally rebuked its demand letter and agreed in the agreement, in the settlement agreement, that there was no violation and repudiated every allegation that was made. And I'll provide that to this audit committee, and I'll be happy to provide it to your auditor to have his complete records on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
During my research, when I
Mr.
talked
Duke,
to the,
into the mic, please.
when I spoke with the permits department, they classified the 19,000 as a violation.
Right, so that's a dispute between the permit department and the permit
That's correct.
payer.
Well,
So if you provide that to them, then they'll have the record. As you heard him earlier say, that he did not have the documents, or they did not provide him the documents which showed what the $19,000 was. So if he would have given him that document, then he wouldn't have listed it perhaps that way.
Okay,
But he didn't
again-
have the document. So if you provide the document to to the auditor and to the permit department, if they don't already have it, then we can see what that says.
Well, I'll be happy to do that, but again, I'm here just to clarify that and give the full facts behind it so this committee can understand exactly what occurred at that particular time. And I'm more than happy to meet with anybody else and provide any documents to verify what I just stated to this committee. Thank you.
Any further comments to come before the board today? No other comments? Any members? None? Move to the next item, please.
Item 2B, update on the Council on Aging Internal Audit Report.
I have sent a draft report on the Council on the Aging to management, and I'm awaiting their responses.
And you're getting cooperation from the administration?
So far, so good, yes.
Okay. And did you have a chance to meet with the director? Or are you going to meet with the director, or did he respond?
Yeah, I've already met with him once. He's supposed to call me today or tomorrow.
All right. Okay, so that's ongoing. You have a projected schedule when that might be addressed?
Well, that report is due, the comments are due September 10th, on or before September 10th.
Thank you. That's all you have on that item?
Yes, sir.
Move to the next item, please.
Item 2C, update on the PPG surplus property audit.
Yeah, I am working on that audit and starting to gather the appropriate documentation, and I look to hopefully have a draft report sent out probably in October, it looks like, sometime early October. That's what I'm planning on.
Okay, any comments or discussion on that?
Wait on draft.
When we get the draft, I'll have some, probably.
Okay. Any comments from the board, from the audience?
Mr. Rousseau, if you could expand, your audit talks about surplus property. I think we could, at this point in time, we've talked about a lot of property that the parish owns. If you could identify all the property we own and then portions of that is declared surplus and the uses of it and any income we're deriving from those properties. We talked about one time before about looking at all our leases on the properties that we own and the terms and conditions of those things. If some of them were substantially below market in the past and the terms that were there. I think you were looking at those at one time. So if possibly your report could be combined as one big report in all the properties the parish owns and the status of it and what we're using it for.
What
I'm
I'd
putting
like
too much on you.
I know. What I'd like for you to do is, when I'm starting my
Microphone, please.
when I'm starting my planning on this report, if you have a suggestion about my scope of this audit, please put it in writing
I'll do
and
that.
send it to me, and I will try to include your scope in my report.
We keep hearing about surplus properties and we're going to sell properties, we're not utilizing
Now, I
properties.
can't promise you that I'm going to include it in the report.
I understand.
But please send it over and I'll
Give you
consider it.
Margie, if you
He's
throw it in
done,
garbage can,
he's
that's
done
fine,
an
too.
audit of the.
I'm sorry.
He did an audit of the contracts we have on our properties, and he already made a recommendation to the administration that they were way low and they need to be
Negotiated. So if you go back to the website and read his audit, he's already done that on the contracts that we
Okay, I'll
have.
do that before I write you on that. That's fine.
Any further comments? Hearing none. Next item, please.
Item 3, approval of the minutes from the April 27th, 2021 special meeting.
Have a motion
Make a
to,
motion.
I'll second.
motion to approve the April 27th, 2021 special meeting minutes have been made by Mr. Konovich, second by Ms. Newberry. Any comments or discussion on the adoption of the minutes of the April 27th, 2021 meeting? Hearing none, the machine is open. Let the record reflect that the minutes are adopted 3-0. Any further business? There's a motion to adjourn. Machine is open on a motion to adjourn, second by Ms. Newberry. And the meeting is adjourned at 1:36.